Hello everybody. So, back by popular demand, today we'll be talking about Andrew Tate. This is following on from, I had really no interest in talking about him again. I try not to give people with toxic mindsets, supposedly, that is my opinion, a platform, because I think as much as it's good to shed light on it, you don't always need to keep going on about it. Do you know what I mean? Like, I said my bit, and then I put it to bed. But obviously, in recent days, there has been, how do we say, a big recent controversy. Sorry, I'm hearing noises. Who's downstairs? Sorry. A big recent controversy specifically focused around Twitter regarding Andrew Tate. And this began, I don't know, a couple of days ago, I think just before the New Year. Happy New Year, everyone, as well. Where something to do with Greta Thunberg. I don't know if he tweeted first or she tweeted first, but all I remember seeing was he was like, I've got so many cars, what you can do about it? And then she called him out, and then I didn't actually see the video that he posted in response, but he posted a video, and because there was a pizza company in it, it proved to the Romanian authorities that he was in the country where they could arrest him on sex trafficking charges, which I think in sort of the grand scheme of things is actually really funny, because he was so pressed about someone calling him out that he felt the need to make a video about it. It's kind of do you know what it's kind of giving? It's giving if anyone knows about the Tati Westbrook James Charles controversy, bi sister, it kind of gives me that vibe. You're so pressed about someone who's she's 19, 20, that you're going to make a whole video about it. Why? Because I guarantee, I don't know him as a person, but I feel like he would definitely be the sort of person to be I'm not giving her any airspace. She's not welcome in my, sphere of existence, blah, 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 blah. But it's you obviously were bothered, otherwise you wouldn't have made the video in retaliation. Do you know what I mean? So it's a bit I don't know. It's just funny. Seeing celebrities getting that online internet beef is always hilarious to me, because I'm is it that deep? Is it really that deep? I made a podcast the other day talking about Twitter beef. It's actually really funny, because basically I made a podcast the other day about Andrew Tate. No, it wasn't really about Andrew Tate. It was about the wealth divide, but I decided not to post it. I just didn't feel like it was up to scratch. I just was waffling a lot. And it was so funny, I put my private story on Snapchat. I was I'm so glad I haven't posted that podcast about, what I spoke about Andrew Tate. Because one of the things that I was saying, because I had this chat with a lot of boys, where I said, I was basically saying that, he does speak a lot of sense. And you know what? I'm probably going to get really called out for this, but I don't care. He does speak a lot of sense, there's a reason people idolise him, he speaks a lot of sense on certain topics. But, I made this point to me and my friend Rowan were having this conversation, Hitler was a vegetarian, but he also killed 6 million Jews. You can have some good ethics, but it doesn't take away from the fact that you can have, damaging core beliefs or values that will harm other people. Just because you're a vegetarian, it doesn't mean that you're not capable of mass murder. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's I've said about this in a podcast before, about how things can coexist and contradict each other at the same time. And our brains like to put people in a box of you're either all bad or all good. And I think this is the thing that's why he is such an internet personality and a topic of discussion, is because he says a lot of things that are smart and educated and would have a positive effect on people's lives, but then he also says a lot of things at the detriment of particularly women and minority groups, which I don't think is fair. So going on from, obviously, him getting done for sex trafficking, I found this video on TikTok. Let me just pull it up real quick. Ooh. because it was this girl explaining sex trafficking, and I'm not going to reiterate it in my own words, I'm just going to let her do it for me. Here it is, hold on.
So I studied human trafficking, specifically sex trafficking at NYU, and I also used to work at a sex trafficking nonprofit in New York. And one of the reasons that I never engage in those sex trafficking videos online where they're like, you know, here's this new sex trafficking or human trafficking ploy where they do this and they snatch you, is because to me, it is really misinformation to be putting that out as the dominant narrative for what sex trafficking is, when the majority of sex trafficking is just simply not going to be someone snatching you up. It's going to be someone that you know manipulating you. So let's talk about the lover boy method. So the lover boy method is a common and main method of sex trafficking and human trafficking in which men rely on misogyny, abuse, and manipulation, in which they date a woman with the intent of making her fall in love with them. And once she is in love with them, they coerce her into sex trafficking so that they can make money off of her. So let's look at what Andrew Tate had to say about his sex trafficking scheme that he was just arrested for. So he said, I've been running a webcam studio for nearly a decade. Over 50% of my employees were actually my girlfriend at the time, and out of all of my girlfriends, none of them were in the entertainment industry before they met me. That is my job. My job was to meet a girl, go on a few dates, sleep with her, test if she's quality, get her to fall in love with me to where she'd do anything I say, and then get her on a webcam so we can become rich together. And so this here... So exactly what he just described is the lover boy method of sex trafficking. So right there, he said all of it, right? So a man comes to a woman with the intent of sex trafficking her, and she does not know this. She thinks that she's meeting a guy, she falls in love, and then he ends up using her love for him to manipulate her into sex trafficking and to coerce her.
So guys, my mother came in and I had to pause it, so I'm just gonna keep playing it. I do apologise.
Money and profits off of her. All the while she thinks, I'm in love with him, he's in love with me, and she starts being trafficked. And so the man knows this, he manipulates her, he comes to her with the intent of trafficking her, and he uses the ploy of romantic love for her to get her to do what he says and to get her to enter into this work where he will take the money. So
that was... I saw that and I thought it was very insightful because it just sort of shows that I guess these industries that are particularly damaging to women and focused around the commodification of women, which is something I'm going to talk about in a second, aren't always as inherently violent as... That's actually probably not the best point to make. They are violent, it is violent, but this image that we have, like she was saying about getting snatched up off the street and being like transported overseas by men that you don't know and whatever, feels a lot more intimidating for a lot of women than this method that she was talking about. And I think that is the thing that is sort of difficult about like this whole thing, is I think it's sort of spreading a lot of awareness into the different ways in which sort of women are seen as commodities throughout, I guess, the men's gaze, the male gaze, if you will. And I think, do you know, in my last Andrew Tate podcast, I was speaking a lot about society's expectation of men and how men are constantly forced to live up to this, like, outdated expectation of like masculinity, and how like the way society is at the minute, specifically men, while they still feel like they need to be the breadwinner and the sole provider, because that's what sort of a lot of people still say, it's really not that way anymore. And that obviously creates a sense of confusion for men because they don't know how to sort of like, what am I meant to be, like, do you know? And I think that inherently creates a sense of resentment towards a lot of women, And I think, as much as men probably wouldn't want to admit, a lot of men do resent women for being more powerful now than we used to be. And I don't think that's in a directly aggressive way, in the sense that they feel the need to act out on it. I mean, some obviously do, quite a lot obviously do, but I think it creates this, like, paradox, I guess you could say, where they feel that they need to protect women, or protect us, or, like, it's like I was saying about this commodification thing. You have to, when you have a commodity, or when you have a product, or when you have things that belong to you. Take it, for example, an iPad. If you have an iPad and it's the best iPad, I'm actually going to be referencing women as objects quite heavily in this. So I just want to say I do not see women as objects, but I want to kind of explain this from the perspective that I'm seeing online. So if you have this brand new shiny iPad, it's the best one online on the market, and you love your new iPad, but your iPad obviously can't provide for itself. You need to charge your iPad, and you need to get your iPad a case, and you need to, like, make sure that your iPad has the best apps and all of this shit. That's something that you're doing for your iPad. But you have this sense of duty to look after your brand new iPad, right? And then sort of as your iPad gets a bit older, a bit more wear and tear, you look at getting a new iPad kind of thing. And you look for the best new shiny iPad. And it kind of, I feel like this is the way that I think a lot of women feel towards misogyny. They feel like when they're in their early 20s, whatever, they're this shiny new thing that men are like, I need to look out for you, and I need to provide for you, and I need to buy you things, and I need to, like, make sure you're safe and protected or whatever. And that was the narrative for a very, very long time, especially sort of as the iPad, i.e. woman, gets a lot older. I just know if this gets screen grabbed and someone takes, like, one section of this of me referring to women as an iPad, it's going to look so bad. But it's fine, because I feel like my point does make sense. But yeah, as sort of women get older, there is this recurring habit of men cheat on their wives with women much younger or shinier, newer and shinier, that have, like, I don't know, different qualities or whatever. And it is this thing of, like, I think nowadays, because we are so much more self-sufficient, I think a big thing is we can have our own property, we can drive a car, we can do things without men having to give us the green light. And I mean, I know if you're looking at, like, Roe v. Wade in America and things like that, we have backtracked massively, and that power has again been taken away from us as women. And I do feel like this is sort of a way that men, not all men, but a lot of men want to regain control over us, because they feel like they need to have some autonomy over us and our bodies and our choices, because they think that's the way things should be. And it's like, because they can't provide for us, or they can't do things for us, or they can't be what they think they should be for us, they have this identity crisis, and they don't know what they're meant to be without being a woman's provider. Therefore, they begin to hate us. Like, I know so many men that just outright flat hate women for no other reason apart from the fact that they can't now boss us around or tell us what to do. And I think Andrew Tate is a perfect example of someone who perpetuates this fantasy narrative of what it is like to still be able to do that. Like, one thing that really upset me about his website was how he said, I sleep with her to test if she's quality. Like, it sounds like when you fucking buy a new iPad and you go to the Apple store and you try it out before you get it to see if it's the one you want. It's this thing again. I'm so sorry that I keep referring to women as iPads. It was just the first thing that came to mind. But it's just, you see this thing of, like, we are not a commodity to be sold or to be, we're not transactional beings, you know, we are people. And I think Andrew Tate, like I said, promotes this fantasy idea of, I think, what a lot of men grew up expecting life with women to be. Because I think it's only really once you start hitting, like, your early 20s, like late teens maybe, that you realise that we can actually provide for ourselves. And I mean, I guess everyone has like a different family dynamic, but I think a lot of people do still live in a nuclear family situation where the men are the primary breadwinners. But I think our generation has really sort of broken out of that mould, and we know that we can do anything, and we understand that like the realistic steps that need to be taken to get to where we want to go. And I think social media has facilitated that more than sort of ever before. We can see how we can get from point A to point B with no help. Do you know, like I was having this chat with one of my friends the other day. I don't know if I've spoken about this on a podcast before or not, but about how, look at the music industry, and doesn't just go for women, this goes for everyone, but you would have to take your demo to someone in the music industry and they would have to basically tell you whether or not you're worthy of a contract or you're worthy of being a star. And it's that trickle-down effect of you have to go to the people at the top for them to decide whether or not you deserve a chance. And oftentimes, these people at the top were men. They still quite are men. And men have a lot of positions of power in industries like that. And now, because of TikTok, people are blowing up left, right and centre because people, as in the mass media, the mass public, connect with their music and connect with what they have to say or their content that they're putting out. Like, look at, I don't know what his name is, Francis, or the train guy, you know? He is just loving his life on his trains, whatever, and he's now got contracts with Gucci. If he'd have gone to Gucci, they would have probably turned him down. It took for Gucci to see how many people related with his content and loved his content and his personality to give him that contract, you know? And that's the sort of bubble up effect that is quite nice to see about social media platforms like this, is that people are sort of now in charge of their own image and their own aesthetic and brand. We don't have to rely on an executive man. I mean, I don't want to say purely just men, because I'm sure there are women in these positions, but just quite often I do see it as men. Like, if we're looking at, like, say, for example, Scooter Braun, this was quite a long time ago, but I remember Kesha came out and basically said, I think it was Scooter Braun, that he, like, sexually assaulted her when she was, like, 18 and all of this shit, and she was tied into this contract and couldn't get out and whatever, because there was this huge power imbalance between the man and the woman, and she was in charge of creating this content, but it wasn't under her brand or her identity. It was what had been curated for her by this man. And this is very similar to what Andrew Tate is doing. Sorry, I feel like I haven't come up for air in like 5 minutes. Let me just take a breather. This is what Andrew Tate is doing, where he is sort of in charge of creating this identity or this brand image for this woman or group of women under the guise of love or affection. And that's one thing that I really hate, is he is perpetuating the female fantasy of being loved and adored and worshipped, and like, women want to be loved, you know? It's like men want to be the providers and women want to be loved. That's not definitive, by the way, but that is a stereotype that is sort of perpetuated massively in, you look at every Disney movie ever pre sort of 2000s era, that he plays on women's, I guess, like, instincts of looking for love in order to achieve his financial goals, which to me does seem like emotional abuse. It's also financial abuse, I would say, because he uses sort of covert methods to take from these women and commodify these women. And, do you know, I think the sort of overarching theme here is that these men that do this, and not only do this, but these men that promote this, and it's so freely out there online on websites, and he's publicising it, he's promoting this, he's not like pretending to be a nice guy. And I think that's what a lot of men respect about him, is that he's not pretending to be anything. Like, he is being straight up about what he's doing. And I mean, I don't know the guy, I've never met the guy, but he is being like very real about what he's doing and how he's made his money. And I think that's one thing that men sort of worship and look up to, is that there's not some sort of like mystery about how he got his money, you know. I mean, it was a little bit of a mystery, I guess, but it's like, this is no like Jay Gatsby story where it's like, how did he get his money, what's he doing? It's out there for everyone to see, and now I think it's even more published because people know why. Like, I mean, I had no idea about him sex trafficking or anything. I knew that he had like some things to do with like rape and sexual assault in the past, but I didn't really know too much about it. But I think, do you know, I was reading this thing the other day, and it was quite a while ago actually. The other day, does anyone else have this where the other day could be anywhere between like yesterday and when you were born? Because that's just me. I say the other day and it was literally when I was 7. Yeah, I was reading this thing the other day about how I've forgotten. Oh my god. Hold on. Hey guys, sorry, I completely forgot what I was going to say, so I had to like re-listen back to my point, but I remember my point now. So yeah, I was reading this thing, and it was basically saying about how it is normal to have like impulses and urges and to want to do things that are harmful. I think I said this in my no, I said this in the podcast that I never posted, I think, about how it's normal to have urges and want to do things that are harmful or damaging or destructive. Like, I was having a chat with one of my friends who has OCD, and one thing that she told me about OCD, which I had no idea about, was that it's really normal to have urges to harm people or harm yourself, or like just basically bring harm to people. And I think that's a really normal thing, to have urges to like aggressive or violent tendencies. But obviously, because we, through the ages, I think I would say that would be in line with the id in, I guess, psychology, id, ego, superego. That would be in line with the id, which develops around, I think, 3 to 5. Don't quote me on any of this. I'm recalling knowledge from 3 to 4 years ago. So this might not be accurate, but I kind of know what I'm talking about. And then your ego is, I think it's either the ego or the superego, and they develop from like 5 to 9. Kind of like the ego is 3 to like, I don't know, like 7, and then the superego is like 7 to 9. And it's basically, you develop this sort of moral compass of, yes, I have the impulse to do it, because the ego, which is your impulsiveness, is about instant gratification and the need to just get things instantly, regardless of the consequences. But then your superego, I think this is right, is the like logical, I can't do this because I'm aware of the consequences. And then I think your ego sort of balances out the two and like weighs up the decision making process between them. I think I'll have to ask Anna Prince about that one because I'm not 100% sure. But basically, yeah, so a lot of us develop this, I'm going to say ego or superego because I'm not 100% sure which one it is, that basically makes us go, no, actually, I can't do that because there will be consequences. But say, for example, we're looking at like Ted Bundy or Boris Johnson, or these people that actively don't really give a fuck, and they're just like, do you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. So I'm going to turn my gain up a little bit because I think my mic's a bit quiet. Hello? Perfect. Okay. Yeah, so we usually don't act on these urges, and there are times where quite often in emotional settings, say for example the loss of a loved one or a breakup or something that is inherently emotional, your emotions will get the better of you, and the impulse to do it will be so strong that you will act on it anyway. And this doesn't, usually there is still some guise of a moral compass. Like, say for example you got cheated on, most people aren't going to go and kill the person that's either cheated on them or been cheated on them with, you know? But there are some people that are going to do it. Like, to have the urge or the impulse is natural, but to sort of not have the ability to regulate knowing when to stop is not natural. And I think there's this big debate of whether, like, is that because of issues with your, like, emotional regulation? Is that childhood issues, sort of not having developed those skills to make you know what right and wrong is? And I think this is all big part of the nature-nurture debate in psychology and sociology, is, are things inherently nature or are they nurture? And sorry, I'm leaving over to put my charger on. It's sort of this big discussion is, are murderers born murderers? Do you know what I mean? I think I spoke about this in my very first podcast that I ever did, where I spoke about Ted Bundy and Boris Johnson and Jeffrey Epstein. Is like, are these people born this way or do they develop this way? And is it their circumstances that allow them to be this way? Like, say, for example, we're looking at Jeffrey Epstein. He was in such a powerful position that, say, for example, he knew the consequences. He knew they wouldn't. Sorry, I hiccuped. He knew they wouldn't really apply to him. So he just thought, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. And I think that's a big thing with, say, for example, people like Andrew Tate, is that they just know that they can do it anyway because the consequences probably aren't going to be there. Especially being a white man, you get away with an awful lot more than a lot of other people. And, you know, I've noticed that that's one thing that a lot of white men specifically don't want to come to terms with, is their privilege. Do you know, I was having this chat, I'm going to kind of stray off a little bit, but I think I hopefully will be able to wrap it back round, is a lot of men, this doesn't actually just apply for men, I'm going to say a lot of white people, specifically Caucasian people. I'm also going to link this into pretty privilege as well. So think anyone that's in a position where they have privilege, people that were born pretty, like, ignore what I just said about whiteness. I'll come back to that in a second. But I was having this chat with one of my friends about people that are naturally born pretty don't believe in pretty privilege because they don't know any different, whereas people that have had a glow up completely understand pretty privilege. Because I, as someone who used to be frankly quite butters, have seen the differences between how my behaviour is taken now and regarded now versus how it was taken back in the day. And I know I do behave quite differently to how I did when I was, say, 14, 15, but I inherently have a lot of the same qualities. I still have ADHD to fuck. I'm still quite like blah 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 blah, you know, like I just like whatever. And people now take that in like, wow, you're so quirky, oh my god, that's so funny. Whereas when I was 13, 14, they were like, you're so fucking annoying, can you just shut the fuck up and leave me alone? Like, and you know, I also read this thing where men, women, it was quite funny actually, but basically, if men think you're ugly, they get annoyed at things you do, whereas if women think you're ugly, they kind of just don't even notice you're there. You're like invisible to them, but they don't get annoyed. But it's like it's been tested that men's, like, I don't know what your anger hormone is, but their anger hormones go up around people they think are ugly, whereas women just like kind of don't even acknowledge your presence. And I've definitely noticed that how when I wasn't conventionally attractive or I hadn't really grown into myself yet, men would just get really jarred by my presence, and they'd be like, you're so annoying, can you just leave me alone? Whereas now I display the same tendencies and the same behaviours, and they are like, you're so different, you're so quirky, oh my god, like, and I'm like, shut up, because 4 years ago you were telling me to like leave you alone and never speak to you again, and now that like I've grown into my face and don't have a double chin anymore, you're interested. And it's this thing of like, pretty privilege is so real, and privilege in itself is so real, but if you haven't gone through that transition, you're not aware of it. And do you know one thing, like, I will speak on this quickly, as like, I wouldn't really say I'm a person of colour, but I would say I'm like ethnically ambiguous is what I would put it. Like, I'm half Tunisian, so in summer I'm very brown and I look visually very foreign, and then in winter I look quite like white, like my skin colour changes all the time. And that's the same with my Tunisian family. Like, in winter they all look very pale, but then in summer they're very, very brown. And I notice that in like the summer months especially, people seem a lot more interested in, like, I don't know, what I have to offer them ethnically. And I think a lot of people that are like ethnically ambiguous will understand this, that people are like, where are you from? And then you're like, Bristol. And then they're like, no, like, where are you from? And I'm like, what, ethnically? And they're like, yeah, I just can't tell, you like Spanish? And it's like, no, like, But it's like, why are you so bothered? Do you know what I mean? Like, and do you know, I had a boy come up to me once. We're actually like pretty good mates now, so it's not that deep. But I remember we kind of had a bit of back and forth on Snapchat, Instagram, about a podcast, because he's a promoter. Shout out Adam Muller. And when I met him for the first time, he went, "Oh, you look way more foreign in real life." And I was like, how do I even take this right now? Like, what? And it's just one of those things where, like, people have this image of you, and then I guess you either meet them in person or whatever, and it can change or it can be distorted, and as you grow up it changes, and it's like people see, like, I don't know, I feel like when I look more ethnically ambiguous, people are more interested than when I just appear white. And it's like, why is that? What do you think? Like, what stereotype is popping up in your head that you think is going to change who I am or what I have to offer you because of my ethnic ambiguity? Is that a word? I hope so. But yeah, I mean, I guess I've kind of spoken about the pretty privilege a little bit and the racial privilege. I kind of want to talk about white privilege for a second, because I think, especially male white privilege, because, do you know, I said about this a lot in the first podcast that I made about Andrew Tate, but I don't even want to say he, I mean all men, and I'm going to say all men. I'm going to say all men. I don't care what race you are, I don't care what anything you are. I don't think men will ever understand the privilege they hold, and this is not me saying that there aren't other disadvantages that they face. However, men will never understand what it is like to be able to walk down a street late at night and feel unsafe. And I guess maybe I should quickly speak on men of colour and gay men, people in the LGBTQ community that do have those fears of, particularly I would say, other white men harming them. But I do think, do you know, I saw this thing on Instagram, and it was this black guy, and he wrote this statement basically saying, I was walking past a girl's car the other day and she locked her door, and it made me really, really upset. And I saw it as sort of a racial attack. And then now that I have a girlfriend and I spoke to her about how much it affected me, she went, that had absolutely nothing to do with you, and more to do with the fact that men to women are always going to be a threat. You know, I've had men try and open my car door when I've been in the car. Like, I was eating my Tesco fucking meal deal, sorry for swearing, but this was such like a traumatic event for me. I was eating my Tesco meal deal and I saw these guys in Tesco, and I used to work this job where I had to get quite dolled up. So I looked nice and I was paying, and they were kind of like eyeing me up or whatever. There was two of them, and I didn't realise they were in the car next to me. Like, when I got back to my car, I was sat in my car eating before I went to work. Luckily, I had my doors locked, because I don't know what would have happened otherwise, but I was sat in my car eating, I looked to my left, and they were like, I don't know, like gesturing at me. And I was just ignoring them, and then one of them tried to open my car door, and I went off on them. I was like, don't you fucking dare. And then drove off, and I was a wreck. I was shaking, I was hyperventilating, like, because at that point you don't know if you're going to get fucking abducted. And this is the thing that men don't realise, is that to them, they'll go like, why won't you just talk to us? It's like, because you could be a threat. You could be the reason I never see my family again, you know? And that's not a choice I'm willing to make because you're going to take offence to it. Do you know what I mean? And it's something that I wish more men would understand, and I think a lot more men are opening up to that idea now of, it's not necessarily about them, it's about the risks that we hear about online. And it's so integral that these men like understand this, and like, it's just really sad. Like, sorry, I've just got really heated, but it's like, that was a really traumatic moment for me, and like, I don't like having to relive it. Sorry, I've just had to relive that, but it was like, it was just really like scary. It's really scary to be a girl in modern day society, and I'm sure in the olden days it was much worse, but I think in the olden days they were much more desensitized to it, and these women would put up with abuse left, right and centre, and this generational ideals were being passed down. And do you know, I think we are a generation of cycle breakers, in the sense that we are much more willing to accept other people's perspectives, and and look at how other people feel about things instead of just going, oh, just stop being so sensitive, stop being so this, stop being so that. And I think this is one thing that, especially with the whole Andrew Tate controversy, is people are going like, but what about the girls in this situation, you know? And I think that is a really positive shift into the sense that we aren't necessarily just seeing these women as like slags anymore, or oh, you're a cam girl, or you chose to do it, or you this, or you that. You know, like one of my friends went through a really traumatic event. I'm not going to get into it because it's completely private, but a lot of people that she spoke to about it gave her a really hard time and said, well, you chose to put yourself in that position, or you chose to do that. And this is a big thing again with the victim blaming that I hate, is that these men manipulate and use coercive control and use sort of things such as what I was talking about at the beginning with, they use this like idea of love and like romantic connection or whatever to entice these women in. That is manipulation, and manipulation is you being made to do something out of your control. It's not your choice. You're manipulated into it, you're gaslit into it, and it's so hard. And I'm so glad we have such a broad understanding of what these terms are now, because we can see these things much more clearly, these behaviours, and it does stop victim blaming a lot. My brain's really just switched off, so I'm going to stop it there, and please let me know your thoughts on this one, because I had a lot of really good feedback on the Andrew Tate one, and I would like to hear a follow-up. So thank you guys so much. I'll see you guys soon.